when you talk about the evangelicals. So I spent 5 of the last like 7 years in like in a leadership or teaching role in evangelical churches, right? So when you talk about almost, getting the red pill, like, you sit there and you listen to them like have these discussions about stuff, and a few people have hit on it, but I want to say, first of all, like as somebody who still has, right, for people that don't know, like my occupation, like I'm a vice president at a healthcare company. So like I lead in a secular environment. So one thing that I notice is that like a lot of times the evangelical Christian approach is like, I want the government to be beneficial to my religion. I want the government to be beneficial to my members. I want the government to prohibit me from being persecuted. Right. So when I have to sit there as someone who has 200 employees across North America, right, that have different religions, that have different sexual preferences, right, that have different belief systems, like why would I want to put somebody in office that's going to be hostile towards my employee, where I would expect me as a pastor and as a Christian to be the light to the world. So this is my problem with the whole concept of it. And my man Corey just said it, right? Like, we're supposed to be a light to the world, not a light to the church. And the world isn't supposed to be a light to the church. So there's supposed to be a difference.
Hold on, back. Bring that back. Bring that back. Say it again. Say it again.
I don't even know if I can say it again, but like, right, but we're
No. You said we're supposed to be the light to the world. The world is not supposed to be the light to the church.
Yes, and
maybe our expectations are that we're expecting people who are far from God, who don't share our worldview, to accommodate our worldview, and maybe us consistently trying to legislate our morality, regardless of what the issue is. Because listen, I'm gonna keep it a buck. If it was my morality, we would all be up at 5:30 and be at the gym and get fit and eat a lot of broccoli. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's not fair. Like, that's not fair. So we keep trying to project our worldview on the world, but the truth is, the world's not supposed to shine the light on us. We're supposed to be, our lives are supposed to look so amazing that the aroma of the goodness of Jesus makes it appealing to want to be around Christians, not because we're divisive and combative, but because we're fun to hang with, because we're kind, because we're generous, because we love God, we love people, we accept people right where they are, and we believe the best for people. If that was our reputation and we were truly the light, then we wouldn't need the world to accommodate our religious preferences and our religious freedoms and this and that, because they would just be like, we like you guys, we like y'all, y'all are fun, okay, y'all believe some weird stuff here and there we disagree with, and I don't know about this position, but by and large y'all are cool, and y'all are always the first to give, and y'all are always the first to step up, and y'all are always the first to lead. We can, and that's the role that non-Christians have in my life. Like, I am that token Christian friend in a lot of people's lives. But by and large, my non-Christian friends tend to all speak positively about me in the same way I'm sure you, Pastor Roy, and they literally call you Pastor Roy in your secular job, right?
At work. Yeah, like I'm a vice president. They call me Pastor Roy at work. And it's because of the fact that like I choose to be a light, right? Like when we're having discussions about budgets, right, as the executives, I'm saying, what are we going to sacrifice before we ask anybody else to sacrifice? Right, like they just know that something like that is, so they're like, okay, let's let Pastor Roy talk in the management meeting. But it's like you said it, we're trying to legislate morality. So we want the things that we're afraid of our children being exposed to. We want the things that we're not effectively discipling our families away from, right, to be what the government tells us is illegal. Right, and you had mentioned the whole thing, right? When Roe v. Wade got passed as a law, abortion actually went down in the U.S. until it became a political issue, and then you started seeing it with a lot of the funding right around Planned Parenthood and all that stuff. You see it go up. Like right now in America and in the world, they're saying teen pregnancy is dropping because of technology. Right, that like the teenagers aren't even actively having as much sex. There isn't as much promiscuity. So you've got the teen, and you just mentioned the whole thing with technology. So that's dropping. But it's like if we were a better example. And somebody had mentioned it, like we're ruining our witness. Like you have somebody whose Twitter feed, and this is my thing about anybody who's like evangelical or Christian, and be like, nobody that I know who is a Christian would allow their pastor to talk on Twitter like Trump does. right? So my problem with the evangelical kind of adoption of Trump is that the Bible tells us to be wary of wolves in sheep's clothing, right? So that means people who are presenting themselves as Christians who are not, right? It tells us to be wise as serpents, right? And to know how to maneuver. So to be honest, on the Democratic side, I know what I'm getting, right? I'm getting a party that's pandering, to be honest, right? That's pandering to marginalized groups. So immigrants, homosexuals, African Americans, poor people, right? The indigenous people, because there's so many marginalized groups they have to try to represent. But they're also not standing up and saying that they're the party of Christ, even when the people who are running are Christian or Catholic or consider themselves believers. They don't position their political platform as I am a believer, right? They position their political platform on a policy or, progressiveness or, democratic socialism, right? Whatever they want to call it. My problem with Republicans, and right, we're called as Christians to judge the fruit of those who claim to be believers. When you stand up and say we are the Christian party, when you stand up and say we are the representatives of Christ within the government, then I'm going to hold you to a biblical standard. I'm not going to hold Democrats to the biblical standard because they don't wave that banner, right? I'm going to hold you to that standard. And when I hold you to that standard, you fail miserably. And that's the conflict that I have with evangelicals. Like, we're supposed to judge our brothers by their fruit, right? So like you're lauding your Lord, and he's not even volunteering for it. You're putting him in the position, right, of being this leader for the evangelical base, but then you're not holding him accountable to the fruit that he's presenting and the things that he's saying and the way that he's speaking to people. And that's the hypocrisy of it, right? Like, I know that God puts people in positions of leadership, but I tell people all the time, Pharaoh wasn't saved. So just right, Nebuchadnezzar, like, there are leaders in the Bible that God appointed. That doesn't mean they were God chose them, but that doesn't mean they were elect. It doesn't mean that they were saved. It doesn't mean that they have salvation. So I pray for the president. I hope that he finds Jesus, and that if he has Jesus, that he grows in maturity, and it's reflected in the fruit that's presented in his life. Because the problem I have is that my Christianity and the way that I live makes me a minority compared to what people see in the public sphere being accepted as Christianity, especially when it comes to politics. So I've had a lot of people who are agnostic and atheists tell me, if there were more Christians like you, and I'm sure you've heard this too, Ruslan, and we might have talked about this when I was in California, if there were more Christians like you, I wouldn't be atheist. Right. So when you have these huge platforms, especially in politics, where there's these broken images of people being represented as Christians, and the kingdom doesn't hold them accountable to their actions, and the pastors are co-signing on this behavior, then it's just a horrible witness to the world, because we're supposed to be the light. The government is not supposed to be the light. So I will elect people, right, that will have an equal representation for the people that I love. And I've got 211 employees, and I love every single one of them. Right. And that means if they're transgender or homosexual or whatever, I love every single one of them. So I am not going to elect somebody that's going to make their life more difficult, that's going to make their life hostile, because it's the government's job to keep us relatively equal. Right. It's the kingdom's job to show people Jesus.